You know, every time you get on a plane, you're stepping into a huge debate about control. Today, we're getting into the really deep philosophical divide between Boeing and Airbus. And trust me, this isn't just about different kinds of planes. It's about two completely different ideas of who or what should really be in charge up there in the cockpit.
It really all comes down to this one question. I mean, think about it for a second. This single idea has shaped decades of design, engineering, and pilot training. It's the reason why we have two families of aircraft that might look kind of similar from the outside but are built on profoundly different beliefs.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to look at these two core philosophies. We'll see how Boeing really puts the pilot first, and then we'll flip over to how Airbus lets the system protect the plane. We'll also talk about what this means for the pilots themselves. And then, we'll tackle that big question. Is one way actually better than the other? So let's jump right into our first section. The main thing you've got to get right off the bat is that the biggest difference here isn't about, the number of engines or the shape of the wings. It's about the core beliefs that are basically programmed into the very soul of the aircraft. And this slide just lays it out perfectly. On one hand, you've got Boeing. Their whole belief system is that the human pilot is and always must be the final authority. The plane is just a tool, a really advanced tool, to help them do their job. On the other hand, you have Airbus, which believes the aircraft's own systems should be smart enough to protect itself and everybody on board from a potentially unsafe command from the pilot. All right, let's dig into Boeing's approach. In their world, the pilot decides. The entire design is built around the idea that automation is this incredibly powerful assistant, but it should never, ever be the one to take ultimate control away from the human in the seat.
This quote pretty much says it all, doesn't it? For Boeing, technology is there to give you information, to make your job easier, to help you out. But those final, critical decisions, those have to be made by the pilot. The system can advise, but the pilot commands. Period.
So how does that idea actually show up in the cockpit? Well, take a look at the controls. They're designed to have this direct, almost mechanical feel. Then you have the protections. They're advisory. The plane might shout at you that you're approaching a limit, but it won't physically stop you from crossing it. And finally, the automation itself. It's built in a way that requires the pilot to always be on their toes, actively managing everything. And of course, this is the most famous symbol of that philosophy, the yoke. It's this direct physical link to the plane. It takes more muscle, and it gives you direct tactile feedback. So a pilot can literally feel what the aircraft is doing right through their hands. It's a very hands-on, traditional way of flying.
Okay, let's completely flip the script and talk about Airbus, where the system protects. This is a totally different universe, one that's built around the idea of computer-mediated flight control. And here you have it, the total opposite philosophy. The core idea for Airbus is that the smartest part of the aircraft is its brain, the flight control computers. And that brain should be used to create a safety net that the pilot operates inside of. So to really get Airbus, you have to understand this one concept. Flight envelope protection. Think of it like a digital guardian angel. The computers know the absolute limits of the aircraft, like how sharp it can bank, how high it can pitch its nose up, and in normal situations, they will simply refuse to let the pilot go past those limits, no matter how hard they push the stick. And here's what that looks like in the real world. The controls are fly-by-wire, which means the pilot's inputs are really just suggestions to the computer. Those protections we just talked about, they're active and they are enforced. This totally changes the pilot's job. Automation becomes less about direct management and more about high-level monitoring. And instead of that big yoke, the Airbus pilot uses a side stick. It's a lot like a super precise joystick, really. It's way less physical work, and the inputs are interpreted by the computer as a desired rate of change. So you're not telling it to move the aileron this much, you're telling it to roll the plane at this speed. The pilot ends up relying much more on the visual feedback from their screens than the physical feel from the controls. So this brings us to a really critical piece of the puzzle, the human in the loop. Because when you have two philosophies that are this different, you're going to need two very different mindsets from the pilots who are flying these things. If you're flying a Boeing, your mindset has to be all about active management. You're expected to know what your automation is doing at all times and be ready to jump in and take over in a split second. But in an Airbus, you shift into what you could call confident monitoring. You're trained to trust the system's logic and manage it more like a supervisor. And as you can probably guess, this totally changes how pilots are trained. For someone moving over to a Boeing, a lot of the focus on the physical handling of the plane. For Airbus, the training is laser-focused on understanding the complex system behaviors and all its different flight control laws.
Which, of course, leads us to the final and maybe the most important question of all. Which philosophy is actually better? After all this, is there a clear winner when you look at safety and how these planes operate day to day? Well, here's the thing. From a regulatory point of view, the answer is a hard no. Both Boeing and Airbus planes are certified to meet the exact same incredibly high safety standards that are set by aviation authorities all over the world. One is not officially safer than the other. So if the philosophies themselves are equally safe on paper, why do accidents still happen? Well, when things go terribly wrong, it's almost never because one philosophy was just flawed. The real root causes are almost always in that messy area where the human and the machine meet. We're talking about pilots misunderstanding what the automation is doing, not monitoring the systems correctly, or mismanaging the plane's speed and altitude. And this quote really just nails it. The real debate isn't about which plane is superior. It's about how well the pilot understands and interacts with the specific machine they are flying at that moment, respecting the unique philosophy it was designed with. And that just leaves us with this massive question for the future, right? As our planes get even smarter, as AI starts to really enter the cockpit, which philosophy is going to lead the way? Are we going to double down on the idea of ultimate pilot authority? Or are we going to put even more trust in the system to protect us? That, right there, is the question that's going to define the next generation of flying.